Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota. Senator Cramer, welcome. I just want to get your take on this pre-dawn raid in Mar-a-Lago. Is this a weaponization of the alleged legal beagles at the Justice Department of the FBI? How do you see this, Senator?
Well, first of all, I think that the Department of Justice is to be feared by every American and have for a long time. I think the concentration of power that they have, the power they have even over individual agencies through their, this bank of lawyers that once they take on a case, the agency that they're taking it on for, that they're supposed to be working for, loses all control. So I've thought the DOJ should be busted up a long, long time ago. But this raid, particularly in the context of the times we're living in, is very concerning. And Larry, they could clear a lot of it up with just a lot more transparency. I know that's not a new argument, but show us the subpoena for crying out loud. It's not like this happens every day. This requires further explanation, or else we're left to presume the worst.
Well, show us the warrant. I mean, no one can see the warrant, and whether there's any Fourth Amendment implications here. Or, I mean, the silence is just deafening, and I think that's adding to the problem. But, I mean, isn't there a double standard, as Greg Jarrett said a few moments ago? I mean, with respect to classified documents, Hillary Clinton walked away with them, James Comey walked away with them. And by the way, the FBI had the Hunter Biden laptop for a long, long time. They didn't take any action. It just seems like a double standard, and it's really aimed at stopping Trump, isn't it? They don't want to look, just my view, okay? I don't want to get too crazy about this, but I think all this stuff, they don't want Donald Trump to run for president again.
Well, and here's what's sort of crazy, and I've often wondered about the motives of Democrats when they do these things, but it is very unlikely that anything that they could come up with would prevent Donald Trump from running or being president. It looks to me like they're driving him right into the arms of the American people, at which point all of this history that they're creating for themselves is not going to endear them any more to the future and former president, if that's the case. I for the life of me don't understand their strategy, other than they're so fueled by hatred that they can't even let a former president just enjoy his status as a retired president.
Let's turn to one of the worst bills I've ever seen, and that's the Schumer Mansion reconciliation bill, which I label as pathetic. So let me ask you about the EPA. Okay, we talked a lot about it. You and I were texting over the weekend. I appreciated that. How much new power and authority will the EPA have in the war against fossil fuels?
Well, there's not a lot of, quote, authority per se, but there's a lot of money and appropriations. And a lot of it the EPA will oversee, a lot of it the Department of Energy will oversee. And anytime you have money, you have power. Now, what we were texting about over the weekend is sort of interesting because, as you recall, in last week when I was on with you and when Andy Wheeler was on with you, we pointed to very specific appropriations that were designed to regulate the power sector, for example, in certain parts of the code, which are absolutely contrary to what the West Virginia versus EPA ruling was. Ironically, Joe Manchin authors a bill that tries to give the EPA more power over West Virginia. That was all stricken out. So Shelley Moore Capito and I both had amendments to directly address this, and before our amendments could even be voted on, the parliamentarian ruled those areas out of order. So from an authority standpoint, I think some decent work was done, but you just can't take $369 billion and spread it over a few agencies and expect there not to be some mischief that goes along with that money.
Don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal editorial today on this, but Bjorn Lomborg, who's a very well-regarded climate guy, climate scientist, he ran some numbers using the UN climate model and all this money that's been plugged in this terrible bill, and said basically it will have no impact, essentially will have no impact on global warming. None, nada. Now, whatever, $400 or $500 billion later, nothing is changing, except, I would say, the war against fossil fuels in the U.S. continues, and the EPA is going to be a leader.
No question about it. So, to that point, if the United States of America ceased to exist tomorrow, so there's no more coal, no more traffic, no jet airplanes, no flagellating cattle. I mean, none of this awful CO2 going into the into the air. First of all, the world would die of hunger. But beyond that, the temperature would make a difference of 0.3% forever. 0.3% if we didn't even exist. So the Wall Street Journal editorial is absolutely right. Larry, we had a hearing last week in the banking committee that the Democrats put up called the economic impact of climate change. I changed it to the economic impact of climate change overreaction or climate hysteria. The real damage to the economy is the response to climate change. The reality is that the United States of America has been a leader in decarbonization, as you know. And the best way to decarbonize, or at least to reduce carbon in the global, remember, this is a global issue, would be to produce more American energy and export more American energy, because we do it so much cleaner and better than anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, that was Rick Perry's thought, I don't know, several months ago on the show. If we exported, more and more and more LNG, exported American LNG, the cleanest in the world, to China, to India, to Africa, we would do more to solve global warming instead of ending or destroying our fossil fuel industry. I mean, that was Rick's point.
And wouldn't it be wonderful to have another area of trade surplus rather than be, a trade deficit with China and other countries? If food is one of the areas where we have a surplus. Energy should be another one of those areas where we'd have a trade surplus. That is good for the world, and that's good for the United States, and certainly good for the free world.
Thank you, Senator Cramer, Kevin Cramer. We appreciate it, sir, as always.
Always my pleasure.